got a blue chip panel to say the least. Kenny Reed. Hey, Kenny, you want to go to the bar with me later tonight? Anyway, Ken Reed, President of North Sales, and that was a nice job today. Very nice. Thank you. And Wayne Burdick, who's certainly done a good job getting an awful lot of people on the water, both racing and cruising and day sailing. Wayne, welcome. President of Beneteau. And Matt Hyde, I'm trying to think how many times I've actually been in West Marine. It's an awful lot. But anyway, you're welcome. Matt Hyde, CEO of West Marine. Welcome. And Jeff Johnstone at J-Boats. Jeff, I keep wondering how could J-Boats possibly top itself, but that J70 sure has become a home run. Congratulations and welcome. And the man that makes everything run smoothly on every boat, whatever it is, Bill Goggins from Harkin. Welcome, Bert. So here's the format. We're going to start out. I'm simply going to ask some questions here, and we'll go down the horn, and everybody's got a couple comments to make, which I'll do randomly, and I got a couple comments myself, and then after that runs its course, we will open up to some questions or any comments you want to have, and you can send it specifically. But anyway, very cool panel that we have at the present time. Well, anyway, Wayne, you've been around the business a long time, I think it's fair to say, and done a darn good job for many years. And you think about this, I'm sure, every working day and every waking moment. And what can the sailing industry do that we're not doing? What would you look forward to going forward that we could do to promote our sport and get more people out there on the water?
Thank you, Gary. First thing, I made the mistake of looking at my driver's license, and you and I are about the same age, unfortunately, and I have a hell of a lot of drinking to do to catch up with you, buddy. And that, you know, in spite of some things like the statistics that come out regarding the sailing industry and the number of boats sold in the U.S. North American market, year 2000, 22,000 boats. Year 2012, 7,200 boats. Now, we at Beneteau look at that as an opportunity, but we also realize that perhaps we are not taking advantage of some things that are at hand that we could do all together. And first and foremost, looking out at the group of people here, I'm incredibly encouraged of the young faces that I see. You know, that Gary mentioned, I've been around a long time. I mean, I am in my 5th decade of being in the sailboat business. And it's about time that I stood aside and let some of these young, energetic people work on things that we know will bring great results. And one of those that I think is right at hand that could be implemented in a much bigger way than is being used today. I am fortunate to be on the board of NMMA. I am fortunate to represent sailing somewhat on the boat manufacturers board of NMMA. And I sit in these meetings and we see the results of the Grow Boating Initiative. It is the #1 site in the world that is bringing new people to boating. #1 site in the world. And that's not specifically for sailing, but just some statistics about that. Out of the, say, 25 top articles that people click on for this Grow Boating website, 12 of them are about sailing. And over 100,000 new visitors per year have been visiting this site that are specifically looking at sailing. And we as an industry, and it's all of us, it is the manufacturers, the vendors, the sailing clubs, everybody has to figure out a way to become a more important part of this. Sailing contributes, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this because we're part of that at Group Beneteau, that sailing contributes about $25,000 per year towards the budget of Grow Boating. They spend millions. We contribute about 1/3 of 1% of the expenses, and we are getting a huge result out of that. So I would like to ask the industry as a whole, what can we do to develop a financial model to help this initiative, which is, it is the number 3 Facebook page in the world is Grow Boating. And out of that, a huge number of people are fans of sailing. They click as fans of sailing. So that's one thing at hand immediately that I think everybody can work on.
Thank you. Jeff, how do we engage yacht clubs, community sailing centers, sailing schools to help get more people out in the water?
I think that's what's working. I think the look at Sail Newport and Courageous Sailing Center and community sailing programs around the country, and that's the bright light. We're cranking so many juniors and turning so many people onto sailing, and now providing adults opportunities. And so I don't know that there's anything to fix there. I would say from our experience, what's worked for us, particularly in these last 6 years, which is the toughest time in my lifetime, certainly from an economical standpoint, it was a time where we saw, looking from an industry numbers standpoint, we look at boats over 20 feet. Sorry for the dinghy guys, but we don't have anything under 20 feet. But over 20 feet, in 2000, there were 4,000 boats built in North America in 2000, and this last year was 1,100 boats. So the market shrunk considerably. There are a lot fewer dealers, a lot fewer builders. The whole industry is smaller, and yet community sailing and juniors, that seems to be on the rise. So I would say that things that we could do to enhance it, I think providing access is the most important thing. Gary, you said it so well at the Sailing Summit. Yacht clubs were founded on the premise of providing common access. Now we need to take it the next step is, now we need to provide access to boats. And it can be a beat-up old fleet that you've maintained well, that supports a local one design, but the extent that we can take people who can't afford to, our own members who can't afford to own boats, and give them one night a week where they can enjoy a boat. And if you make it after 5, then it's probably not going to compete with the junior program. So whether it be an all-dinghy handicap race, parent-child, whether a few owners donate a big boat one Wednesday night for 6 weeks and you bring out the teenagers, it's just little things I think that we can do to provide access and keep people involved in sailing for longer than the first 10 years.
You know, Jeff, you were just over in Germany at the Dusseldorf boat show. Hope the weather was okay. But what was something you found over there that was kind of intriguing to you?
There's a famous German soccer league called the Bundesliga, and a bunch of sailors, actually it was, this is a whole nother topic, but as an aside, the German Sailing Federation gave up the management of their national sailing team to a commercial enterprise a few years back. And so it's a company that specializes in fundraising, and they fund the team's coaching, and now I think the Federation's trying to figure out how to get it back. But this same group decided they wanted to engage all of Germany in a grassroots kind of sailing movement, and so they created a league, and it was 18 teams, and this was a reach out to 18 yacht clubs. So this is like going to any, 18 yacht clubs in the U.S., and the concept was 6 events, 6 boats, fleet racing, and 18 teams would come in to one of these events, and okay, 18 teams, how do they sail 6 boats? Well, these are 4-leg, windward leeward, but they're so short. They're so short. They take, the races take 8 to 12 minutes, and they crank them through, and actually, as someone from the Danish Sailing Federation, they are copying the exact same model for this year. What he said was amazing was while 6 teams were out there sailing, the other 12 were right there watching during the day, not having a beer, but watching and talking about sailing and isn't this great and how you growing stuff at your club. And so it's very much a club-to-club deal. There was corporate sponsorship. The industry was supporting it. So it's really it created this event. This year, they had the press conference. 53 clubs around Germany are now signed up for this league for 6 boats. And they're going to have sail-offs and eliminations and the rest of it. Now the Danish Sailing Federation is copying the same model for this coming year, just to get club-to-club fleet racing, which everyone understands, but get it down to such a small segment that it's not very costly. So the club is $2,000 for a club to enter for a 6-event series.
Wow, impressive. Well, Matt, I understand that you started taking sailing lessons about 1.5 years ago or so, and there's a lot of passionate sailors here around the room, but CEO of West Marine is a very important part of our sport, no question about it. So what are you doing at West Marine to engage the sailors and help keep that passion alive?
Well, let me just first off say that I can say for sure that I am probably the newest sailor in this room and definitely the worst sailor in this room. No doubt about that. And that kind of gives me, I think, an advantage and a disadvantage because I haven't fully assimilated into the industry yet, and not having assimilated, you see things a little bit more fresh. From the standpoint of West Marine, of course, we're a retailer, so I would think of us as not really having the goal of getting people off the couch into sailboats. We're higher up on that funnel of creating new sailors, and our job really is ensuring that we continue to keep people ignited about the passion of being on the water. And over time, enough of those people will become boaters and sailors, and you just heard the statistics from Wayne and Jeff and others. We have a tough job ahead of us. We have a tough job across boating, and I'm so encouraged that I see the audience here that's committed to growing sailing. I know the work that the NNMA is doing with Discover Boating. It is fantastic work. A lot of people are pulling on this, but we have a tough job. And I'll just say, because there's lots of things that West Marine is doing, but I'll just say one thing that's really important to us is we're getting clear as a company around the difference between our average customer and our target customer. And I think this is important work for anybody who's in the industry to think about, because what happens when you confuse the two, you end up dying with your customers. And you have to think through who really is that target customer and how do they think about boating and sailing. The target customer for all of us is younger and more diverse, which is not the way that we image boating and sailing. And that's important, and it's really important for us to have that conversation and think about, what is it that we can do as an industry to promote boating and image boating differently that appeals to people who are used to seeing things much more young and much more diverse and much simpler. And that's work that we're doing, and we certainly have a huge role in this as the largest retailer in boating, and probably if you think of us as a media company, we would have the largest circulation of any direct mail company or organization in the United States as well. So we're working hard on getting clear, not to abandon our average customer, but getting clear on who that target customer is and how we want to make boating and sailing look fun and make sure that people are connected to that passion about the water.
Well, Bill, at Harkin, you promote and sell to the consumer at the retail level, but you also do a lot on the wholesale level to people like West Marine. And what things are you doing at Harkin to build the sport, keeping in mind that you're not only always directly with the consumer?
I think we're in a fortunate position with Harkin where we touch so many different sailors in so many different walks of life, from the junior sailors just getting his feet wet for the first time to that person that's dreaming about the retirement phase of their life. They want to do a circumnav to Grand Prix. And so you touch a lot of different folks, and you can listen to a lot of different people. And so one of the things that we have inside of our industry and inside of what we're trying to do at Harkin, aside from just listening, is to assimilate that and connect a lot of dots. And looking around this room, you see tremendous commitment. I mean, the people that have actually flown here from a field and have made it for 3 days of fun and learning and exchanging of ideas have one thing in common, and that is this passion and this love we've got for the sport. And so one thing that I would really, really hope that we could take away from here is ways to take the industry. One word that hasn't been mentioned yet is Sail America, which is our Sailing Industry Association. There's the NMMA, which is the Marine Manufacturers Association. Those are arms of all the people that work hard to make the parts and products and equipment for you. But there's quite a disconnect, frankly speaking, between what we do in the industry side, what the sport does on the organizational side, and in some ways what each individual yacht club, each of you that represents your yacht club here does. I think there's got to be a way of simplifying and almost creating a simple unifying strategy of talking about what it is that we need to do together. Because the dirty little secret here is we're a cottage industry. We're a small industry relative to larger sports. But some people say that's great, and some people say that that's a challenge. But I look at it as a great opportunity for us to be able to link all of those items together, because there's so many golden secrets, and it really ties back to that passion. You can see that with paying it forward. I mean, everyone in this room has really gotten good at articulating what the problem is. And we don't even need to rehash the statistics or the gap between the 20 and 40-year-old after they leave college. There's a lot of tremendous opportunities that are hiding in here. We're right now this week in Good Peeville, Wisconsin. We're hosting Harkin University, and it's for our industry, trade, and also some mentors and some people that aren't necessarily professionals but are hoping to be so. I see Dawn here. She's got 4 of her saplings from Oak Cliff in Pewaukee, and they're learning everything about how a boat works. And that knowledge isn't something that we're going to pay forward through to every individual sailor, but if you have a mentor or a friend or someone you can lean on that really gets it and they can make the pressure go down and make it easy and more accessible and comfortable, that's great. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from my comment here, it's simple. Unify what we're trying to do, okay? If we can find a way where sport and industry and all of the great yacht clubs and community sailing associations around this country could work a little bit closer together. I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but that's really what we need to focus on, Gary.
Thank you, Bill. Kenny, let's say somebody's done a sample of sailing. They've taken a lesson or went out for a sail, and then how do we engage that person to take it to the next level, to actually make it their sport, make it their pastime, and keep them involved in the sport for a long period of time?
Well, I'm sure you guys are really sick of hearing from me by now, but I think the big thing is for participation is improvement. That everybody in this room participates in a sport, whether it's, and by the way, it was amazing after our talks how many people came up and said, we got to talk more about the recreational sailor rather than the racer. I think a lot of these things fundamentally start moving towards the racing side of it, because it's easy to make a video of the racing side of it, right? Well, the recreational side of it can't be ignored, and it's something that it's one of my 5 things on my list now, by the way, to leave this thing with. But whether you're a recreational sailor or whether you're a sailboat racer, I think improvement is a big part of why we keep coming back. If you think you're getting worse at something, you just don't do it anymore. So at North, we've made a really conscious effort. We're taking a good chunk of what we would consider our sponsorship money, and we're putting it into something what we call North U Regatta Services. And we're going to go around to events in the country. We're trying to start hooking up with yacht clubs to go and just teach people, for example, how to start a boat race. What can be the most intimidating, fundamentally scary things any non-sailor has ever done in their life is to go line up these 5, 10, 15 ton pieces of fiberglass next to your buddy and not smash into them. Well, how do they not become magnets? So we think that by training people just in the simplest of terms on how to get better at the sport, will get them coming back more often, and also hopefully tell their buddies about the word of mouth in this industry. Like these guys said, it's a cottage industry. The word of mouth is still the most valuable tool we have from a marketing standpoint. So we need people to have fun, be happy, and tell all their buddies about it.
Wayne, I'm wondering how many people are basically first-time sailors that acquire a boat, and of that percentage, whatever it is, how do you help them along, as Ken says, to improve and get educated and do better?
From the focus of Beneteau 30-foot plus boats, that it's pretty amazing when we look at the last several years. The introduction of dock and go, or 360 docking, which is the joystick maneuvering system, and actually the toughest thing for anybody to imagine is putting that darn boat in and out of the slip. And that the dock and go, or the 360 docking, was to address that. I'm at a marina, and a guy, I'm waiting for an owner to meet him next to one of our boats. And a fellow walks down. Waiting for the owner. I'm waiting for the owner. This young kid comes down. I'm waiting for the owner. The young kid comes up and says, "Hi." It's a 50-footer. And I said, "Well, hello." And I get to know him a little bit. And, how many boats have you had in the past? None. Well, grew up in a boating family? No. You chartered a lot? Never. This is the first sail I've ever had. And it was the ability to him see a video of somebody putting this boat into big boat into a dock with a joystick. And it is that sort of thing, and the development of new ideas that I think bring new people into boating. We have a constant focus of make it easier, better value. And that is the key to our industry, I think, overall. And that whether it is one design racing, whether it is Grand Prix racing, if you can control the cost, if you can make it easier for people to participate, like they don't have to hike out that way. I know my old back won't do that anymore. That I think that grows the sport.
Thank you. Jeff, I kind of wonder sometimes if you're going to run out of numbers for all the various J-boats that you, I mean, there's only 100 numbers, but anyway, you've done a great job. First of all, how do you come up with something like the J70 that really seemed to hit a nerve chord? And then after that, tell us what's next.
Can I get back to you, Gary? No.
Well, how did you come up with the J70?
Well,
Let's start with that.
Yeah, the J70 actually was incubated about 13 years ago. And we had wanted to come up with for us, would be an entry-level sprit boat. The J80 had taken off and done really well, and just like the J24 way back when it got to a certain price, the market back then needed a under $10,000 boat, and the J22 came out. So it was trying to address specifically an entry-level sprit boat, and we had never done a ramp launch boat. We had articles about how you could ramp launch a J22 in the Rocky Mountains with a huge vehicle and a really long, so we tried to make the best of ramp launching a J22, but that wasn't quite market acceptable. We actually built a prototype of a 20-footer back in 2000, and it was a centerboard ballasted boat, and for purposes of production, we just couldn't come out, we just didn't have a build solution to come out with a boat, and we were distracted with the great economy that we were all going through and doing big boats. The J70 really grew out of listening to our customer base, and that's something it sounds overrated, but if you're going to survive in business or as a club or as an organization, you really need to have a steady feedback channel. Either you're participating in the same activities, you own the boat, you sail the boats that you build and design, and we really heard from a lot of people that they wanted to sail with their grandchildren, not just take them out in the powerboat. They wanted to be able to take their 9 or 10-year-old out of the Opti, throw them on the tiller of a keel boat that wasn't going to tip over, and bring out the whole family. And it sounds corny. Our company was founded, the crew in the first year of the J24, I was the oldest, I was 16, and the rest of the crew was 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, and my dad trying to coach us around the buoys. And so the brand has really been, we've been instilled by our parents that to keep that philosophy going. It's multi-generational sport. 5 generations you mentioned earlier, that's incredible. That was the inspiration for the 70, and then we said, well, it's got to be big enough to have stability. And at 20 feet, we just couldn't find the right combination of a boat that could fit 4 or 5 people and be stable enough. So it just got longer. And so it's 22.75 feet. It weighs 1,800 pounds. You can carry 6 people around if you want for day sailing, or you can single-hand it or double-hand it. But it was really started with that premise, and then you got to stick to your guns. So the great thing about one design is, first of all, nothing's one design unless there's a critical mass of boats. The boat has to be appealing to you as a sailor and as a family. There has to be a reason to buy it other than a promise of a class, because there's so many great classes. If you can get enough boats out there, then you create an owners association. Then you can write the rules to protect the intent of the boat. And I'll give you one example. J24, the biggest debate, 8 years into the class, 4,000 boats. The biggest debate in the class, these are serious world champions, like 5 times just down, two doors down, was whether the 4 bunk cushions ought to become optional on the boat. The J24, through all its growth, had 4 bunk cushions. It was the most comfortable one design out there because the whole crew could sleep on board, and most people did. And but the class stuck to that and wasn't swayed by the top 1%. J70 class now, winches and roller furling are standard. And the average 25-year-old doesn't need them, but most of us on stage, well, maybe not Bill, but I certainly need them, and roller furling. So while I have the floor, one last thing. This whole industry is working on making sailing easier and requiring less crew. What would really help outside the one design side to help grow the sport and keep the very same people who are buying new boats, who are engaged with this concept of less crew and easier sailing, be great if the non-one design organizations would provide more credit on the rating side for fewer crew and provide tangible credit for things like self-tacking jib, roller furling. Right now, if we have a 40-footer, we have a well-selling 40-footer in Europe, first thing the crew does when they buy it to compete, they got to take off the roller furling because there's no credit, and then they got to add 3 more people onto the rail just to keep up with everyone else that's stacking the rail. So all this innovation goes for naught unless it's given credit. So we could definitely improve sailing by addressing some of those.
I like the J70, the fact that 2 crew can't turn around and hike out, which made Kenny's picture won't be quite as dramatic as the 23 guys hanging over the side of that boat. Matt, you mentioned communications and that you're a big communicator and you put a lot of time and energy into that. So what do you think is the most effective communications that you found? I mean, we've got such options with all social media and everything that's going on. What do you find to be effective?
You know, one thing I have to say when it comes to growing boating and growing sailing, we have a lot more questions than we have answers for, and but we're all impacted by. We're not. This is not an insular industry. We're impacted by how communications is revolutionizing across, you know, every aspect of the industry and every bit of retail. You know, obviously right now, I would guess in this room, along with everybody else, we're consuming more digital media, and consumers are impacted by digital media. And so as a company, we're continuing to transition from print media into much more digital media. And I think the work that NNMA has done with Discover Boating is a great point of how, what's a great example of digital media done right to inspire participation, and as West Marine, that's really the tradition or the transition that we're making from print media more into digital media. And as we think about that target customer, they're consuming it a lot, digital media.
Bill?
I just want to build on what you're illustrating here. There's one, I love Geraldine to bits if she's in the room, but one of the things, you know, asking people to turn off the phones is really just, it's not going to happen. And I think we've changed, the world's changed. And we have to recognize that we're all consuming media every minute of our lives. And we've got to build that into what we're talking about. You know, I don't know exactly the statistics, but I want to say something like 50% of people cannot get away from their smartphones for under 5 minutes. 20% of them have checked their smartphones in church. It's something like 50% of the people check them while driving, okay? 9 people, I remember this one for some reason, but 9% of people have used them while having sex. Okay, so these are statistics very scientifically proven from Harkin market research. So what I'm building at is whatever the date was when someone invented the first remote control for the television, that's when the world changed. That's when instant gratification became part of what we need. And it could be a dramatic, game-changing shift. You know, we see the statistics, but youth sailors are different than youth sailors from 30 years ago. However, the one thing that all youth sailors have is they have a family. And one of the things that works so darn well is when you can really create programming and ideas where everybody's tied together and there's a sense of community, a sense of belonging. The other very comprehensive Harkin research that I did was last night we were laid over in Denver, and I was talking to Dane, who is a 30-something snowboarder. And I asked him, I said, well, what keeps you in the sport? What's cool? And he said, I love hanging out on the mountain. I love going to the bar and seeing my friends, and it's the place to be. I will do it any minute I can. And we've got this golden opportunity, as much as we joke about Gary's tour through 500 bars. What did 20 to 40-year-olds do? They want to hang out together. They want to visit. And, you know, at the same time, everybody's scarce for time and scarce for money. However, if you can tie all of the resources that we have in this room together, my goodness, there's all sorts of ways where we should accept, you know, these things for something that's new and exciting. So one last little thing. I was involved with Sail America on the board for some time, and I asked what was, I think, kind of a rhetorical question, which was to everybody, and it was a room about this size, and I said, go home and think about what is your post-baby boomer marketing strategy, because everybody in the room were baby boomers, and everyone of those baby boomers talked to their friends and made them customers. And that's, if you look at the average age of the sailor, it's literally followed the baby boomer for the last 10 years. So what are we doing, all of us, to backfill? And I was met with scared blank stares at the time, and that's one of the things that I think we all have to try and resolve here.
I want to thank you for steering the conversation away from 500 bars to another topic there. Very good. Kenny, you get to travel around the world a lot, not just sailing around the world, which you did, as you said, 2.5 times. But how do you compare how things are going in sailing in the United States with what you're seeing over in Europe?
I just can't get my head around that 9% number.
Like I said,
You sure they weren't, actually? So, for sure, sailing, especially sailing in Europe, is quite big. Europe, I think you just follow a lot of this. Is you can follow. We're going to have this Olympic theme because part of what U.S. sailing is so much a part of is the Olympics. But you just follow the really good Olympic programs around the world right now, and you see where sailing is really a hotbed. In England, Australia, New Zealand, France, these are places. You go to France. They asked me to do a sponsorship talk in France to a whole bunch of budding French sailors, and I told my story of trying to get Puma into sailing and how it came about, and how I kind of went through the process, and how essentially my theory was you had to get lucky. You had to just meet the right person who, in essence, thought of what you were going to ask them before you ever asked them. If you tried to go through an entire marketing department to get up and get a decision finally made, it was not going to happen. It was never going to happen. And all these French guys in this room were sitting there like I had 7 heads. They're like, what are you talking about? It turns out that half of that room, the sailors themselves get phone calls from sponsors. Hey, would you consider coming and sailing my boat? I'm going to put a program together. So that's how, it's really different. It's very commercial. There's still a lot of boats being built, but like the statistics, it is tapering off. But I think because of all the nicks and the crannies and just the massive amount of shoreline for the amount of water that people get to go sail on, it's just an easier sell over there. But commercially, it's a really big deal. How much? The England Olympic team, how do they fund it by using their lotto, right? The lottery. So just a very different outside the box mentality outside of this country. And I think that's why things like this are so valuable, is because all of a sudden we can start brainstorming and maybe catch up and supersede in many of these new kind of growing ideas.
Wayne, you've got a French connection. What are you learning from Europe that can help us over here?
From our perspective, innovation and everything that we do to drive value and all of that is so important, but there's a different attitude in Europe regarding time. And that it is amazing to go down to La Rochelle on one of the pontoons and see this family. You talk about the 5 generations, on one boat. that there's grandma and the children and the grandchildren on a 27-footer taking off for weeks at a time. And I think that there is an essence of time compression that happens here in the States which doesn't happen in Europe, and I don't know how we deal with that, and that you all need to come up with the answer for that. We don't see ourselves ever stopping working. You know, but in Europe, to get the guy on the weekend to try to have him work on a Sunday takes an act of Congress, or their parliament, I should say. And that I think is a very big cultural difference between the two spheres.
I think one of the complex things about our sport for bigger boat racing is handicap rating rules, which it's almost bad Scrabble. There's so many different acronyms for racing. But Jeff, you've done a pretty good job going the non-PHRF, non-handicap route with One Design racing. Do you think that's the secret going forward?
It's really about getting people together, and I think my first time to a Krispy Kreme out here was, I think, with Jeff Brown, and we went in, and it was on a Sunday, and there was a car rally going on, and everyone had their hoods open, and they're just hanging around, and that's sort of One Design in a way, or even if it's not exactly One Design, just getting people who have boats that are similar. And I think one of the experiments that actually works in handicap racing is to the extent that you can, as an organizer, incentivize boats in the area to even just have 3 or 4 of the same boat within a class. So sort of a class within a class. Because a lot of times all it takes, I remember out here it was Shock 35s and J35s sailing together. Similar thing in the Midwest. In Long Island Sound for 3 or 4 years, there was a 70s, there's like a PHRF between 70 and 80. And it was 3 or 4 different types of boats. Everyone was happy with their relative ratings. They kind of organized their own little class where it wasn't perceived that there was an unfair advantage. So I think taking lessons from the successful One Design classes, you can apply that to actually handicap racing in a certain way and have it thrive.
Wayne, you've had pretty good success with some One Design, the 36.7, the 40.7, for example. How do you see the balance between handicap type boats that you're building and the One Design?
In Europe, IRC is the name of the game, and what they're discovering over there, thinking about the differences between what's happening in the two spheres, they're realizing that even IRC is facing its challenges now. That IRC was supposed to be the great leveling rule, it is no longer a great leveling rule. That you have professionals that are really figuring out the secret rule and making advantages for themselves. So that we constantly, and this is Group Beneteau, which are, the different brands, Beneteau and Jeanneau, they've just introduced the new Sunfast 3600. And that boat is brought out because there is a belief that worldwide, and these guys have proved it, worldwide, people want to be on the water as an equal. They want to have that experience of sailing and racing, making sure that it isn't the rule that wins, but the talent that wins. And along with the One Design side, that Charleston Race Week, which comes up in April, has a pursuit class now, and it is very interesting last year to see some boats in the pursuit class in the middle of Charleston Race Week that I don't think I'd ever seen out on the race course before. And these are people just having that experience and the joy, and it wasn't the winning or losing that counted to them, but it is being on God's great ocean, enjoying a wonderful time, and then ending up at the bar and hopefully meeting Gary Jobson.
Well, Ken, in the last issue of Sailing World magazine, you had a kind of a thick pamphlet on One Design sailing with some articles from some of your people. But what impressed me was the list of One Designs that you guys are building and designing for. So how do you balance between this One Design and handicap? Where do you see the growth?
Well, I've come full circle on this. I used to be the guy who used to beat my fist and say, why can't all these rating rules all get along? Why can't they all just come into a room, sit down, and figure out what's best? But then Dennis Conner taught me never bet against people's self-interest. And the fact of the matter is that every person in this room has a boat, and most likely none of those boats are the same. But they want to race against each other. Your boat is better in HPR, in Benji's new class. Your boat is better in PHRF. And by the way, we all race PHRF because we all have one thing in common. We all think our rating sucks. So that's why PHRF works. But then there's ORC, ORR, OR, blah, 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 IRC, all these different rules. The fact, there's one thing that's come along that is really close to working, I think, and that's what's called this universal rating form. And it's an attempt. As a sailmaker, it's incredibly frustrating for us when all of we have to measure mainsails for your boats completely different based on the rule that you are going to go sail. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same size sail, no matter what. But they all have, their egos have gotten in the way to have their own methods as to how they think a mainsail should be. That's how bad it's gotten. So if this universal rating form comes along, when your boat, anytime, any place, you just measure your boat to this universal rating form and you're done. You can enter an IRC regatta, you can enter an ORR regatta, you can enter anything you want, and it's easy. And then your self-interest, which, by the way, I'm a big believer in, completely takes over. Join the race that gives you a best chance of doing well. It's really that simple. So I think this universal rating rule, or this universal rating form that attempts to tie all these things together is a really good step. And if these rule makers let their egos not do this, then we all have to stand up and shake them until they finally do, because it's a big deal.
Well, Ken, tomorrow at 8:30 in the morning, we have a panel discussion to talk about where we are with big boat racing, and we're going to hear about the universal measurement system. How about this for a blue ribbon panel? Steve Benjamin, Stan Honey, Dave Ullman, Bill Lee, Dan Nolan. Pretty strong. So overnight, I'm going to have a couple good questions for him. How do we make this work? And I think that having a standard form where you get that measured and then you can go from ORR to ORC to IRC or PHRF would really make it a lot easier for the user and probably get more time on the water. And I thought, Ken, you made a good comment earlier that, you know, leaving a dock at 8 a.m. and coming in at 7:30, sometimes there's just too much sailing in a day. And I know some places the wind comes up at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, so have the races at 4 in the afternoon and race from 4 to 7 as opposed to waiting around for 4 hours to get out there. It's pretty good. And a club up in Marblehead, Eastern Yacht Club, I was pretty intrigued. They were trying to build one design sailing, and what they did is they hired their in-house coach, and the coach is a coach at large coaching everybody, but really it seemed to me, this is me speaking now, you're coaching kind of the bottom of the fleet. So as you say, they're trying to improve and get better, and you feel you get better, you're going to stick with it. If there's no hope, you don't stick with it. Our time is coming to a close. Bill, you have any final comments you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I was just getting a little itchy. You know, we've been talking a lot about a very specific segment of the sailing community, which is racing and ratings, and it just gets so specific that we have to remember that it's, you know, Harkin's heritage is racing, yes. However, the general sailing community is far broader, and that cruising community is an important component that's very hard to talk to in a U.S. sailing type organization. And I was thinking about it, you know, the organization is designed around programming and educating and training, and that's one of the greatest strengths that U.S. sailing has. I was with Gary and with Tom a few weeks ago in Chicago, and we talked about that. And I think the challenge to us is to, in some ways, deprogram for a minute and also realize that we have to remember every single person when thinking about sailing is recreating and they're on vacation. And it's not always about following a program or fighting through the next rule. It's certainly about making things easier. So I think a challenge for us all is to find that golden thread where it's a tremendous amount of strength is in this room because of the programs, because of the education, but that's also a weakness. And so that's something you have to think about, and you have to think about what is it that we need to do to compensate for that. And that means not always, I grew up racing sailboats, one design, and I enjoy all aspects of sailing, but I think we really could spend much more time mentoring people just into the love of water and Mother Nature.
Can I jump in on that? So thank you very much. And I'm just going to hold up a mirror for just a minute, and I think this is important since this is a panel about growing sailing, is that this industry is very wired to racing and big boat cruising. And we're forgetting all about what Ken talked about earlier, the recreational sailboater. So the people who, like myself, who want to go out of Santa Cruz Harbor, sail for a couple hours, come right back and make it super simple, super easy, and in a language that everybody can understand. And don't forget those people, because they are the top of the funnel that will eventually, maybe a handful of them, buy a brand new sailboat and care passionately about racing. But if we forget about those people, we're gonna have challenges in racing or in sailing. I think we're already facing those challenges. That recreational sailor is really important. Remember, our number one competition is time. It's the cell phone. It's the 7.5 hours that the average person in America now is spending in front of a screen, whether that's a TV screen, a computer screen, or a cell phone screen. And I see a bunch of you looking at screens right now. So it is time, and we have to keep this simple and easy to get into and less complicated. That is the direction of how we're going to grow sailing.
Scott West had a comment. Scott? All right, we'll cut into our valuable lunchtime here. I think that's a good suggestion, Scott. Alex, you had a comment? Here you go. There you go.
So I took my kids out of a junior program because it was so structured and so focused on racing that they weren't having any fun and they weren't learning how to sail. So I'm actually buying a Hobie 18 right now off of Craigslist because it's cheap and it's easy and it's recreational and they got colorful sails. And it's going to be an easier way, and we're limited on time as well, whether it's you've only got your kids 50% of the time or you've got all the Xbox and so on to compete with. But we're going to go sailing, and we're going to go sailing as a family, and we're just going to go recreational sailing.
Okay, thanks. Any suggestions for the panel? John, welcome.
What are you going to drink tonight? What's the drink of choice?
Ginger ale. Yeah, there are a number of yacht clubs that do have registries and lists to get people out there, but putting it on a national thing is a good idea. So duly noted. Thank you. Good point. Yes. Patty Boyd is the executive director of Sail Canada. Welcome. Across the border here. Well, let me take a stab at the choice. You know, I kind of jokingly said I've been around to a lot of yacht clubs, and I've been around to a lot of yacht clubs. And one of the failings at many yacht clubs is simply too many classes. It doesn't help you to have 5 of this and 6 of that and 4 of that and 11 of this. You really have to have, the leadership has to have the courage and say, okay, here's the 3 boats that we're going to race at our club at various costs or various sizes. And I think that would help sailing grow, just doing that at a yacht club. And you're right, ISAF does recognize over 100 boats, and of course that's under review too. And I'm finding it a lot of fun to be at ISAF these days. A very interesting challenge, to say the least. As far as the boat manufacturer, I'll take the first stab, and then I'll turn it over to our manufacturers. They are in business, and they do need to make a living, and they do need to be profitable, and they have to go with the changing size. And I applauded Beneteau when they came up with the 36.7, which I thought was a really good, innovative boat, and got a lot of people out racing in one design. And the J boats kind of took a look at what's going on in the waterfront, and they have the J70 that's really going well. And I pushed him hard. You saw, you know, what's next. He didn't tell you he's got this foiling boat coming out that he's thinking about it. I mean, that was exciting anyway. But let me turn to Wayne. Why don't you try and answer that, and Jeff will try and answer that, and then we're going to wrap up in about 2 minutes.
Well, certainly we have a simple answer. Every boat should be a Beneteau, or from Group Beneteau. But I don't think that you're ever going to see a change. That we're always amazed that, having gone through the crisis that we went through over the last several years, and by the way, we see that as a huge opportunity, because people are going to return to the market, and certainly there are more people today than have ever been before. There's more wealth today than has ever been before, and it means that there is a bright future for all of sailing. So congratulations for all of you to be here, and we'll look forward to good things coming out of it. And that we are not going to see fewer manufacturers unless there is no financial reason for them to do that. So it is amongst all of you to decide how many one design classes there are going to be, and I'm sure Jeff would agree with me that they should all be Beneteaus.
Well, certainly one of the most popular issues at both Sailing World and Cruising World that I write for is the Boat of the Year contest, and looking at what's new, and there's been some good innovations, and both of you have had some winners in the past. Jeff, you want to take a stab there at Patty's question?
It's a really good question, and I think I'm thankful that we're still in business after 37 years, because we've had, the industry's had some pretty tough times, and the sailing industry, like most industries, you innovate or you die. And if you hang on to the old way of doing business, or if you're a yacht designer and you only design one boat, if you're Bruce Kirby, you can make a living at it. But most of the rest of us have to keep designing. But I would say the silver lining, probably what makes us the most proud over all these years as a company, is the fact that the J24 was a well-built boat, and there are people still using J24s in programming, and they are, you can pick them up for $5,000, and that is our entry-level strategy for engaging people right out of college. We've got plenty of 20-something, 30-somethings in Newport sailing in Fleet 50, 3 or 4 people partnering on J24s. They each stick $1,000 in, and they're sailing a boat that we designed and helped create. People won't buy a new one design unless it fits their lifestyle. And the only way it fits their lifestyle is if it's a good day sailor. And you mentioned day sailing, recreational sailing. Most of our owners day sail more than race. And half the J70s sold in Europe are going to day sailing families. So you have to pass that test first, and then enough owners get together, then you organize them as a class. But it's really an owners association. It's not a one design trying to compete with another one design.
All right, well, let me...
One little quick plug. Look up, grab a pen and write down Hick's Law and look it up. It's one of the things that's just deep embedded in our psychology in terms of decision making. And I think your point is well taken, which is if you have too many options, it takes too long to make a decision. If it gets all too hard, people go elsewhere. And so we've got to take that now. You've got to weigh that against innovation, because we need innovation to be able to have those things. So it's
All righty. Well, John McNeil, that was a good point, duly noted, and I think there's going to be some discussions on your suggestion there. Well, let me thank our distinguished panel, Kenny, Wayne, Matt, Jeff, Bill, keep up the good work. Your hearts are all in the right place. You're all doing a great job, and you could clear the fact that nobody bailed out for lunch, even though we're 15 minutes over the schedule here, showed that there was a need for this discussion. A lot of good information this afternoon, and my last plug for our Big Boat seminar tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.